So I'm Ellie Marshall, and I'm one of the Research and Knowledge Transfer Managers at HGCA. I'm going to be talking to you this morning about some investigations we conducted into grain quality, looking at factors which can influence this and how this has affected the current harvest and also implications for harvest beyond this year. So we've been spending some time in responding to quality issues. And this all began due to 2012, which many of you remember as a very poor year for grain quality. In many cases, grain grown failed to meet the required specifications. This not only had an effect on the UK market, but at a more individual level, growers faced financial penalties, and this affected many farm businesses. I'll be talking to you today about two investigations we've conducted using long-term quality data sets to understand the factors which can influence this grain quality. We'll be looking at two of our major crops. Firstly, wheat. Now, there are three main characteristics for specifications on wheat: specific weight, Hagberg falling number, and protein content. This investigation has so far been conducted in specific weight, although we are also looking into Hagberg falling number and the protein content. But for the purposes of this talk, I'll be focusing on specific weight. And also in oilseed rape, we looked at the situation of free fatty acids. Last year, these rose above the required 2% threshold, which can lead to foaming in biofuels and make it unsuitable for human consumption, again leading to penalties for the grower. I'll be talking about that later, and starting with the specific weight story. So quality specifications are tightly regulated, and in regards to specific weight, it's regulated against the end use of the grain. So these are divided into groups, NABM groups 1 and 2, which are used for bread flours, and NABM group 3 for the softer biscuit and cake flours, and also group 4 for feed. The NABM group 1 and 2 require a higher specific weight of around 76, NABM group 3 at 74, and feed wheat also has a specification at 72. Of course, the UK also exports wheat, and the varieties which are deemed suitable for an overseas market are notated as UKS or UKP, and these also require specifications. So we decided to look into this, not only to help the problems that growers face with financial penalisation, but also to help drive the export of wheat in the UK market. HGCA currently holds two sets of quality data, and these are both very comprehensive sets. Firstly, there is the HGCA recommended list. Now, these are variety trials, and quality samples are taken from these trials as well. The trials are grown using robust fungicide applications, much more than would be used on commercial farms. And this is so the varieties can be grown to their absolute potential. We have data available from this from 1994 to the present day. HGCA also holds the Cereal Quality Survey, which is conducted annually. And these are samples from commercially grown crops. Their samples are collected and analysed from laboratories across the UK, and it's currently used by our market intelligence team to determine the overall quality of grain in the UK annually. We have detailed data available of this from 2007 to the present day. So we start by looking at the recommended list trials data. You see here we're looking at the average specific weight in the trials across the years from 1994 to the present day. We have the thresholds of NABM group 3, which you see from years 1994 to 2011, all trials met those specifications. The higher at 76 NABM group 1 and 2 threshold. So in the majority of the cases, the recommended list trials reach those thresholds, and are particularly good years 1995, 2000, 2003, actually 2011 was a good year as well. Of course, many of you will notice 2012 was, again, a very, very poor year for quality. And the recommended list trials did not escape this. You remember me saying that the recommended list trials use a very robust fungicide application, effectively eliminating disease from the trials. So, therefore, the drop in quality in 2012 cannot have been simply due to an increase in disease. So if we look at 2013, we've got provisional results from the RL, and this is suggesting that the specific weight quality has been restored this year, reaching levels comparable to 2011. But these are recommended list trials and not from commercially grown crops. So what can this tell us about the commercial situation? If we just take the past 6 years of the recommended list trials, we see there's a gradual increase from 2007 to 2011, and then the major drop in 2012. If we map onto this the commercial trials from the Cereal Quality Survey, we see that across those years there is actually a tight mirroring between the two sets of data, showing that actually the recommended list trials are a good indicator of the commercial situation. The gradual increase from 2007 to 2011, and then a sharp drop in 2012. Again, we have provisional data from both data sets this year, recommended list in the green and the Cereal Quality Survey in the blue, and that shows again that the commercial data is agreeing with the recommended list data this year, that specific weight quality has restored in 2013. But of course, quality isn't the only driver when you're growing your crops. One of the most important factors is, of course, yield. If we're to map the yields of the crops onto this, in the yellow line against the yield axis, we see that specific weight does not always follow the yield. Does not always follow the yield closely. So in years such as 2008, it achieved a very high yield, yet the specific weight, there was no difference between the previous year, 2007, which did not produce such a high yield. If we look at 2012, it was a poor year in general. There were low yields achieved and also low specific weight. Whereas 2013, the yields are starting to come up again, and of course, as we've just discussed, the specific weight is also higher. So what are the differences between 2012 and 2013, and why is the specific weight so different? One thing we can look at is the climate. So if we take the 2012 harvest year, we have the rainfall shown in the green bars and the sunshine hours in the blue line going across the chart. The main months which are important for getting good quality grain are the grain filling months in June and July. We see that in the 2012 harvest year, it was high rainfall and low sunshine hours, very suboptimal for producing good quality grain. Whereas in comparison, in the 2013, the current harvest year, we see that there is low rainfall and high sunshine hours. These are really great conditions for excellent grain fill, giving higher specific weight. However, this is only 2 years, but if we look across different years and across the two data sets, we see that this trend still exists. So the commercial data is the blue squares, the RL data, the green diamonds in each chart. Firstly, you see of rainfall. As the rainfall drops, you get a higher specific weight. And also in sunshine, the reverse is seen. So with higher sunshine hours during the grain filling months, you get a higher specific weight. So these are the climate factors which may have affected the specific weight over the years. But tied in with that, there'll also be differences regionally. So if we were to look at commercial quality throughout the past years, from 2007 up until 2012, well, first up until 2011, we see that there is a trend for increasing grain quality. So these are the different regions. We have the Southwest, Southeast, East, Midlands, Northern regions, and Scotland, and their mean specific weight achieved in each of the years. So in many of the regions, 2011, the light blue bar, achieved the highest specific weight for that region. And then came 2012, and there was a huge drop in every single region on specific weight. In some regions, the drop was a higher proportion than others. For example, the Midlands achieved its highest specific weight in 2011 and dropped to the lowest throughout the UK in 2012, and a similar situation was seen in the Southwest. This was what was happening on commercial farms, and the data for 2013 is due out very soon. But we can look at the recommended list data and see what's happened with the trials this year. So again, we have the different regions. We have the Southwest, Southeast, East, Midlands, North, and Scotland. And we see that Scotland actually achieved the Scottish trials actually achieved a very high specific weight this year in comparison to the other regions. And actually, in comparison to the 5-year average of these trials, so anything above this line showed an improvement on the 5-year average, and anything below this line, so the Southwest, showed a decline in the 5-year average. Scotland this year actually had very good trials, producing very high specific weights, whereas in the other regions, they're fairly close to their 5-year mean. But as I've said before, it's not all about the quality and the specific weights. If we're to look at the yield as well, this is the mean specific weight for each region and the yields mapped on top of it, we see that although Scotland produced a high specific weight in 2013, the trials actually yielded lower than in other regions, such as the Southwest, where the trials yielded very high, but only gave a low specific weight. So this is new data, which we're currently trying to understand. And as I've shown before, we can look at climate data, and this is something we'll be investigating with this, as we have access to many web data from many of the RL trials. So this is something that growers perhaps do not have so much control over, climate and region. But growers do have an option when it comes to variety choice. So when looking at the specific weight, we chose to class varieties by their ripening. This is all available on the recommended list. And ripening is classed in days relative to the control variety solstice. So the varieties which ripen early, which is 1 to 2 days before solstice, and examples of these are such as Gallant or Cordial. There's the varieties that we've classed as timely, which ripen at the same time as solstice, such as JB Diego and Claire. Varieties which ripen later, 1 to 2 days after solstice. And also varieties which ripen very late, which are 3 to 4 days after solstice, such as Invicta and Cocoon. You notice that there is a decreasing trend, so the earlier varieties give a very high specific weight compared to the later varieties. The data shown here is both RL and commercial, and it's a mean over 5 years. So it's not just in the good years, and it's not just in the bad years that this pattern occurs. So achieving high specific weight seems straightforward, growing early varieties. But again, it's not the only factor when you are choosing your varieties. If we're to look at what happens to the yields in these groups, we see that actually the opposite effect happens. So the earlier varieties achieve a lower yield than the very late varieties. So it's important that as can be seen here, there's a trade-off between the quality produced and also the yield produced. So a sensible approach may be to spreads the varieties you're growing across different ripening stages to give you options later in the harvest. As I said before, this is averages and doesn't only happen in good years or happen in bad years. And looking at provisional RL data this year, we see that the trend still exists, going from early ripening varieties to later ripening varieties, decreasing specific weight, and an increase in the average yield over the varieties. So just to summarise some of this work with the specific weight, you see that season can have a large influence, as can the region, and these are both influenced by the different climate. Variety choice can influence specific weight, and this is something that growers can change their options, perhaps by considering a range of variety maturities to give yourself options at the end of the harvest. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the free fatty acid work we've done as well. This is in the oilseed rape. So again, this began due to 2012, where free fatty acid levels in Scotland rose above the 2% market requirements. This leads to a decline in the oilseed quality, and this can cause foaming in biofuels and make the oilseeds unsuitable for human consumption. This leads to penalisation to the growers due to the cost of removing these impurities. At present, it was unclear whether the results were linked to agronomic practice. From research in the scientific literature, it was very limited, and most of the work had been done on Canadian varieties rather than UK. But there were some things we could get out of it. Firstly, storage seemed to be an important factor. Both oxidation and hydrolysis can cause an increase in free fatty acids. So hydrolysis is where an enzyme can attack the triglyceride, and these enzymes are present in molds, and it releases the free fatty acid. Quality defects were also shown to be an important factor due to the increase in free fatty acids. Defects such as immature seeds, damaged seeds, germinated seeds, and cracked seeds. Also, moisture content. Again, this helps encourage the presence of molds, leading to the hydrolysis of the free fatty acid. And also drying temperature can lead to burnt seeds and cracked seeds, which can increase free fatty acid content. So we worked together with the oilseed industry, and we put out a survey in Scotland trying to address how growers manage their crop, from the agronomy of their crop to the storage and to the handling of their seed. We had 67 respondents, and I'm just going to go through briefly review some of the key findings from this survey. So in this preliminary study, we identified harvest dates had an impact on the free fatty acid content of the rape. We see that those harvested pre-August the 20th, or from the 3rd of September onwards in the 2012 year, gave an increase in free fatty acid content compared to those within that range. We believe that this could be due to, in early harvesting, giving a risk of immature seeds, and late harvesting, there's the risk of pre-germination. And this is encouraging, as this backs up some of the scientific research that we saw earlier. And also drying was seen as an issue with free fatty acid content. As the drying temperature increases, there is a general trend that the free fatty acid content of the rapeseed also increases. Again, the inappropriate drying temperatures result in burnt seeds, and this can give high free fatty acid content. And finally, we saw that ventilation of the seed was also an issue. Those growers which did not ventilate their seed had a higher free fatty acid content than those which did. And it was a practice which was only conducted by 27% of growers who responded to our survey. So whilst this was a pilot survey with a small number of respondents, there are some key messages that we can get out of this. Firstly, that there are practical steps that growers can take to minimise the risk of free fatty acids. But the main thing is attention to detail and to treat the crop as you would treat any other high-value crop. Timeliness of harvest, you don't want to delay the harvest if possible, as this can lead to a higher free fatty acid content. Drying temperature, you want to be careful when selecting the drying temperature so it's not drying too hot and too quickly. And also ventilation was shown as an important factor in reducing the risk. So this survey will be continued, and we're opening it up to the rest of the UK, as we don't believe it is just a problem seen in Scotland. We have the paper copy on our stand just outside this hall, and it's also available through our website. We want to do this again to fit in with long-term monitoring, as quite often problems only arise 1 year and then are forgotten about. But we need to have a comprehensive data set to understand the variation between a good year and also a bad year. So I'd really encourage you to fill in this questionnaire, even if you haven't had any problems with free fatty acids this year. A limitation of the survey was varieties, and we weren't able to look at that during this questionnaire, as varieties are often bold. But this is something we'd be interested in doing in the future and seeing if there are any differences between the oilseed rape varieties. So just summing up some of the conclusions from today. Firstly, climatic variation and regional variation is an important factor in grain quality, although it is a factor that growers perhaps do not have such a control over. Whereas variety choice is, and getting good variety information and understanding your different options is an important factor. And also longer-term quality monitoring. We wouldn't have been able to do these studies without that. And it gives us information in how crops act over a series of years. So it is important in the good years as well to give us comprehensive data sets and an insight into different variations. So I'd just like to thank you for listening to me. And if you want to find out more about these projects, they are available on our website. The specific weight work is available at Project Report 515 and also Project Report 514 for the free fatty acid work. Thank you.